A former member of the NBC television family has died. Rue McClanahan was 76.
What if everything audiences believed about the Golden Girls was built on carefully guarded secrets? Rue McClanahan, the woman who brought Southern belle Blanche Devereaux to life for 7 unforgettable seasons, spent her final years pulling back the curtain on one of television's most beloved shows. From explosive backstage feuds to casting decisions that nearly derailed the entire production, the truth behind that Miami kitchen table was far more complicated than the cheesecake and laughter suggested. Before she died in 2010, McClanahan left behind revelations that continue to reshape how the world understands this landmark series. The casting secret that almost changed everything. Few television decisions carry as much weight in hindsight as the one that almost put Betty White in the role of Blanche Devereaux and Rue McClanahan in the chair where Rose Nyland would sit. When The Golden Girls was being assembled in 1985, producers had a specific vision for each character, and that vision did not initially match the actresses most audiences now associate with those roles. According to multiple sources, including a Television Academy Foundation interview with McClanahan herself, she was originally expected to audition for Rose Nyland, the sweet and slightly naive Midwestern widow, while Betty White was being considered for the role of Blanche, the flirtatious Southern belle. The logic behind that early thinking was straightforward. White had spent years on the Mary Tyler Moore Show playing Sue in Nivens, a character known for her overt sexuality and romantic pursuits. Producers assumed she could step naturally into Blanche's stilettos. McClanahan recalled reading the script and feeling an immediate pull toward Blanche. She described knowing with certainty that the role was hers. When her agent informed her that the part was earmarked for White, McClanahan pushed back hard, telling her agent she could not imagine playing Rose. Her agent made the stakes clear: take Rose or walk away from the show entirely. That ultimatum sat uneasily with McClanahan, who had already sensed that the series was going to be something special. When McClanahan went in to read for director Jay Sandrich, something unexpected happened. Sandrich asked her to try reading Blanche's lines on the spot. She agreed immediately, and the results made the decision almost irreversible. Days later, both White and McClanahan were called in together and asked to read the opposite roles from their original assignments. The chemistry that emerged from that session was undeniable. McClanahan as Blanche and White as Rose felt complete in a way that the original arrangement simply never would have. McClanahan later admitted she never found her footing with the Rose character at all. She described feeling lost when trying to inhabit that particular kind of gentle innocence, and reflected with honesty that performing Rose 8 seasons would have been genuinely difficult for her. That candid admission says a great deal about how much of Blanche came from a place of authentic understanding rather than simply technical acting. Betty White, for her part, was initially unenthusiastic about the role swap, but came to embrace Rose fully and later expressed admiration for the direction McClanahan took Blanche, saying McClanahan took the character to places White herself would never have had the confidence to explore. 2 careers were defined by a single afternoon decision made in a casting room, and McClanahan spent years reflecting on how narrowly the show's entire dynamic had come to its iconic shape. The significance of this casting truth stretches beyond mere trivia. The Golden Girls, which premiered on NBC on September 14, 1985, became one of the most decorated sitcoms in American television history, earning 65 Emmy nominations and 11 wins across its 7-season run. That extraordinary achievement rested on an ensemble chemistry that was nearly configured in a completely different direction. McClanahan understood that, and the weight of it was something she carried with genuine appreciation. The show she almost didn't shape into its final form became the defining achievement of her professional life. With the casting foundation now in clear view, what unfolded behind the cameras once production began tells an even more complex story about the women who made that show what it was. Strip away the scripted warmth and coordinated performances, and what emerges is a portrait of real human friction that never fully disappeared. The backstage tensions nobody wanted to admit. The kitchen table in the Miami house where Dorothy, Rose, Blanche, and Sophia gathered over cheesecake became television's most recognizable gathering place. On screen, those 4 women represented friendship at its most enduring and most generous. Off-screen, The picture was considerably more complicated, and Rue McClanahan held a unique vantage point on all of it because she sat directly between the two strongest personalities in the cast. McClanahan wrote about the dynamic in her 2007 memoir, My First and the Ones Who Got Away, describing the relationship between B. Arthur and Betty White with diplomatic but telling language. She stated that she loved both women deeply and found tremendous joy in working alongside each of them. She also acknowledged that their relationship with each other was never what she had hoped it could be. That measured phrasing coming from a woman known for her directness speaks volumes about how charged the atmosphere between Arthur and White truly was. The tension between those two actresses became one of the worst-kept secrets in Hollywood by the time the series ended. At a 40th anniversary event for the show held in June 2025, co-producer Marsha Posner Williams confirmed the feud openly, offering the now famous assessment that the two women could not have warmed up to each other even under the most extreme circumstances. Other members of the production team offered various theories about the root cause, with some pointing to the fact that White consistently received more audience applause during tapings, and others noting that Arthur deeply resented the way White would break character mid-scene to interact with the live studio audience. Arthur was known for staying fully committed to Dorothy during every taping. When White would pause to acknowledge the crowd or throw out an improvised remark, it disrupted the rhythm Arthur considered essential to the work. That difference in approach extended deeper than performance style. The two women came from different acting traditions, carried different notions of what discipline on a television set should look like, and apparently never found a way to reconcile those contrasting philosophies across 7 years of working together side by side. McClanahan was privately allied more closely with Arthur than with White in the interpersonal dynamics of the cast. Casting director Joel Thurm, who later wrote about his experiences on the show, described how both Arthur and McClanahan had expressed strong negative feelings about White, including language that McClanahan reportedly used directly in conversations with Thurm. The source of that antagonism, according to Thurm, was partly tied to how White treated Estelle Getty once Getty began struggling with memory issues on set. Getty, who played Dorothy's sharp-tongued mother Sophia, suffered from severe stage fright throughout the production. According to McClanahan, Getty would become almost unreachable on filming days as anxiety overtook her. She would write lines on her hand to manage the panic, a strategy that became necessary as her memory challenges worsened. Writer Stan Zimmerman, who later discussed the production environment in his book The Girls, From Golden to Gilmore, revealed that only a small circle of insiders understood that Getty was quietly dealing with early-onset dementia during the later years of the show's run. Most of the crew simply assumed her struggles were related to exhaustion or an active social life, not a neurological condition quietly advancing beneath the surface. The one significant backstage confrontation that crossed from cold tensio and into open conflict happened during the third season filming of the Christmas episode. Crew members and writers heard shouting from backstage and moved cautiously to see what was happening. Arthur and White had broken into a full argument in a way that had never occurred before and never repeated itself afterward. The resolution came not through conversation, but through a piece of improvised humor from the stagehands, who replaced the prop calendar being filmed in that episode with photographs of the male crew dressed in outrageous costumes. The shared laughter that followed temporarily dissolved the tension and allowed the group to move forward. McClanahan described the cast's ability to find comedy in pressure as one of the genuine strengths they shared, even when relationships were strained outside the performance itself. Beneath the personal conflicts and interpersonal friction, there existed a larger truth about what the Golden Girls was attempting to accomplish on American television, and McClanahan's reflections on that mission reveal how seriously she took the show's cultural weight. The story behind the story involves a production that knew it was breaking ground even as the cameras rolled. The show's controversial ambitions and what they cost when the Golden Girls premiered in the fall of 1985, no network had attempted anything quite like it. The series, created by writer Susan Harris and produced for NBC, centered 4 women over the age of 50 living together in Miami, and it used that domestic setting to explore subjects that primetime television had largely avoided: menopause, ageism, the AIDS crisis, sexual harassment, homelessness, domestic violence, LGBTQ relationships, and the complex realities of aging in America. That ambition was not accidental. Harris had been pushing television toward more honest social territory since her earlier work on Maude and Soap, and The Golden Girls became her most sustained and successful attempt. McClanahan understood that Blanche Devereaux occupied a genuinely subversive position in the cultural landscape of the 1980s. A woman in her 50s or 60s openly pursuing romance, taking pleasure in her attractiveness, and speaking freely about her desire for intimacy ran directly against what mainstream entertainment was willing to portray about older women. The character pushed back against the assumption that women past a certain age had no claim to sensuality or desire. McClanahan described admiring Blanche for that very quality, seeing in the character something brave about refusing to shrink. The show tackled LGBTQ topics with a directness that was remarkable for its era, including storylines about AIDS, hospital visitation rights for same-sex partners, and one of Rose's closest friends coming out as gay, all handled with warmth and genuine empathy at a time when network television was largely avoiding those conversations entirely. That progressive sensibility earned the show a devoted following in the LGBTQ community that has never diminished, and McClanahan was deeply proud of the show's place in that history. She spoke in later interviews about the responsibility that came with the audience's trust, and about how the writers and cast understood that getting those episodes right carried real stakes for real viewers. The costs were less obvious but genuinely present. Arthur found the recurring jokes about Dorothy's physical appearance and perceived lack of femininity increasingly difficult to absorb. Because she was not like her castmates in being able to separate herself cleanly from her character, jokes about Dorothy translated for Arthur into something uncomfortably personal. She came close to leaving the show on multiple occasions, and the creative team was aware that Dorothy bashing, as the writers themselves called it, was a genuine point of friction with their lead actress. By the 7th season, Arthur had made her decision. When contracts for continuation were offered, McClanahan, White, and Giddy all said yes. Arthur said no, and the show ended. The absence of Arthur also explains why the spin-off that followed, The Golden Palace, lasted only a single season. McClanahan, White, and Giddy all participated, but without the dynamic anchor of Arthur's Doroth. Why, the chemistry that had defined the original series proved impossible to replicate. McClanahan reflected on that experience with honesty, acknowledging that the four of them together had formed something that could not be reduced to three. Whatever made the original show work required all its specific elements in combination. McClanahan also spoke about the show's approach to subjects like breast cancer, a topic that hit personally for her. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1997, surviving the experience and later using her platform to speak openly about prevention and early detection. The Golden Girls had addressed health issues, including cancer, as part of its broader commitment to depicting real life rather than sanitized versions of it. That alignment between the show's values and her personal experience gave McClanahan a perspective on its legacy that was both professional and deeply felt. All of this brings the conversation to the final years of Rue McClanahan's life, a period in which she looked back on everything the show had been with remarkable clarity and an honesty that left nothing softened or strategically framed. What she revealed in her final chapter is perhaps the most important part of the story. What Rue McClanahan left behind by the time the final decade of her life arrived. Rue McClanahan had outlived 2 of her 4 Golden Girls castmates. Estelle Getty died in July 2008 from Lewy body dementia at the age of 84, and B. Arthur died in April 2009 from cancer at the age of 86. Those losses left McClanahan and Betty White as the surviving members of one of the most celebrated ensembles in American television history. The show they had made together was approaching its 3rd decade of continuous syndication and reaching new generations of viewers through cable reruns and early streaming platforms. McClanahan's health had its own complications. She had survived breast cancer in 1997 and had come through the experience with the same characteristic combination of openness and resilience that defined her public presence. In late 2009, she underwent triple bypass surgery, a serious procedure that nonetheless appeared to be followed by a period of relative stability and continued activity. Reports from people close to her described an actress who remained energetic and engaged in the months leading up to her death, working when opportunities arose, and maintaining the warmth that colleagues across decades had consistently described. On June 3, 2010, Rue McClanahan died of a cerebral hemorrhage at New York Presbyterian Hospital at the age of 76, following a stroke that struck her at her Manhattan apartment. Her manager confirmed that family was with her when she passed. The response from the entertainment world was immediate and substantial. Betty White, the last surviving member of the Golden Girls cast, described the loss as more painful than she had anticipated, saying she had treasured their relationship in a way that the words available to her could not fully express. The memoir McClanahan had published 3 years earlier, My First 5 Husbands, and The Ones Who Got Away, became a kind of final testament to how she understood her own life and her place in the stories that had shaped her. She wrote about the Golden Girls with a mixture of gratitude and honesty, describing the creative chemistry of the production as something she recognized as rare even while she was living inside it. She was clear-eyed about the tensions and the difficulties, but equally clear about what it meant to be part of a show that was doing something genuinely new. Her reflections on Blanche were particularly telling. McClanahan never pretended that Blanche was simply a comic creation without deeper meaning. She understood that the character's insistence on remaining a desiring, laughing, fully alive woman in her later decades was a form of cultural argument. Every episode in which Blanche pursued romance, asserted her worth, or refused to be made invisible was pushing back against assumptions about what older women were permitted to want. McClanahan described that work is meaningful in ways that went beyond professional satisfaction. The truth about the Golden Girls that McClanahan spent her final years communicating was not a single dramatic revelation, but rather a composite picture. It was a show built on casting decisions that almost went another way entirely, held together by 4 women who did not always find each other easy, navigating topics that other productions would not touch, and somehow producing something that resonated more deeply than anyone initially imagined. The cheesecake was real. The friendship was complicated. The achievement was unmistakable. In the years since McClanahan's death, the Golden Girls has only grown in cultural presence. The show's following in the LGBTQ community has remained extraordinarily loyal. New generations continue to discover the series through streaming, often approaching it as contemporary rather than dated, because its emotional concerns translate without resistance across decades. The issues it addressed, from the loneliness of aging to the search for connection after loss to the fight for dignity against a world that would prefer certain people to become invisible, retain every bit of their urgency. Rue McClanahan did not leave behind a single shocking confession. What she left behind was something more durable. A clear-eyed account of a remarkable production, a celebration of what 4 women accomplished together even when they sometimes struggled to be in the same room, and a genuine reckoning with the ways that television at its best can honor the complexity of human experience. That legacy belongs to all 4 of them, but it was McClanahan who most fully understood, while she was still alive to say it, exactly what they had made and why it mattered. The story of Rue McClanahan and the Golden Girls is not a story of manufactured conflict or hidden scandal. It is something more interesting. The story of how imperfect circumstances, complicated personalities, near-miss casting decisions, and genuine creative ambition produced something that outlasted all of them. The friction was real. The achievement was larger. And the truth, as McClanahan understood it, was that both things could be equally true at once. If this video gave you a new perspective on Rue McClanahan and the Golden Girls, make sure you hit subscribe and leave a comment below with your favorite Golden Girls memory. Share this with someone who grew up loving the show. And if you want to go deeper into the stories behind television's most iconic casts, check out the next video on your screen right now.